The rain had been falling for hours. Thin, slanted sheets that blurred the streetlights into tired halos. I sat in my car outside the grocery store, waiting for the dashboard clock to blink past 7. The wipers scraped across the glass like tired hands brushing away a memory. That's when my phone rang. "Noah!" I answered, already smiling at the thought of my grandson's small, serious voice. But what came through wasn't the usual gentle chatter. "Grandma," he whispered, breathless. Don't go back home." My hand froze on the steering wheel. "Sweetheart, what do you mean? Where are you? Is your mother?" "Please," he cut in, voice trembling, words rushed and frightened. "Just promise me, Grandma. Don't go home tonight." The line went silent. A faint rustle, a sound like someone whispering in the background, then a sharp click. I stared at the screen. The call had ended. No message, no return number, just the faint echo of his fear buzzing in my ears. For a long moment, I didn't move. I replayed his words, each one colder than the last. Noah had never spoken like that. He wasn't a dramatic child. If anything, he was quiet, careful, too grown up for 9. The rain intensified, hammering against the windshield. I started the car. My hands were shaking. By the time I turned onto our street, the world outside had turned black except for the pale glow of porch lights reflecting in puddles. Our house stood at the end, tall, still, and dark. No lights in the windows. No sound of the television. Clara's car wasn't in the driveway. I parked and sat there for a minute, listening to the rhythmic tick of the cooling engine. I told myself Noah must have been confused, maybe scared of a nightmare. But a deeper part of me, the quiet maternal instinct that had never been wrong, whispered something's off. When I finally stepped out, the air was heavy with the smell of wet soil and something metallic. I climbed the porch steps slowly. The front door was locked, but the key turned stiffly, as if it hadn't been used in days. Inside, the silence was absolute. Only the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my shoes and the low hum of the refrigerator reminded me the house was still alive. I set my bag down, calling softly, "Clara? Noah!" No answer. Then from the hallway, I saw it, a small red sock, damp, lying near the door to the basement. Noah's. The one with the faded dinosaur print he refused to throw away. My pulse quickened. I bent to pick it up, the fabric cold between my fingers. And somewhere below, in the dark belly of the house, I heard something move. The sound was small, almost nothing, but it was enough. Whatever had begun with that phone call wasn't over. It was only beginning. The noise in the basement stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I waited, breath caught halfway in my throat, listening for another sound. Nothing. Only the whisper of rain against the windows. I took a step forward, then another, until I reached the hallway. The light switch clicked, but the bulb above me only flickered, an uneven, shivering glow that made the walls seem to pulse. Shadows stretched and folded across the family photographs. In one frame, Clara was smiling, holding Noah on his first day of school. The glass was cracked straight across her face. I turned away. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt paper. The air was warmer there, the faintest hiss still coming from the fireplace. When I knelt beside it, I saw the edge of a note, half burned, half intact, the words curling in ash. I reached in carefully, brushing away soot until the letters became clear enough to read. "Has to look natural. She won't suspect a." The rest was gone, swallowed by flame. My chest tightened. The handwriting was unmistakable. Clara's. I rose unsteadily, heart thudding in my ears. "Clara!" I called again, louder this time. "If this is some kind of joke, it isn't funny." No reply. The wind outside pushed at the house, rattling the back door. I turned toward it and froze. The door stood slightly open, rain spattering the tiles inside. A trail of muddy footprints led inward, too large to be Noah's. I followed them with slow, careful steps until they vanished at the base of the stairs. The silence pressed closer now, so complete that even my breathing felt intrusive. I caught sight of Noah's school bag still resting by the porch bench, half-zipped, a small drawing sticking out, a stick figure family, the mother's face scratched through in heavy crayon strokes. Something inside me cracked then. Not fear, not yet, but recognition. The kind that whispers you've been blind too long. I turned off the flickering light, gripping the banister for balance. The darkness felt safer than the truth creeping into focus. From the top of the stairs came a soft creak, as if someone had just stepped away. I knew then that I wasn't alone, and whatever had begun with a child's warning was already living inside these walls. The sound at the top of the stairs faded, leaving the house heavy again. Too quiet, too still. I stood in the dim hallway, every sense sharpened by fear. The cracked photographs on the wall seemed to watch me. The smell of smoke and rain lingered together, like two ghosts refusing to leave. I gripped the banister, forcing myself to move, one step at a time, back toward the kitchen. My knees ached, my mind racing. Has to look natural. She won't suspect the words from the burned note repeated in my head until they became a rhythm of dread. And suddenly, like a knife through fog, memory cut in. It was 2 years ago, the day of the funeral. The house had been full of people offering condolences that meant nothing. Clara stood by the window in black, arms folded, her face a mixture of exhaustion and quiet fury. "He left everything to you," she said without turning around. "It's temporary," I replied too quickly. "Until things settle. The will can be revised." She faced me then, eyes red but dry. "You mean controlled? You always have to hold the reins, don't you, Mother?" I tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back. The distance between us became permanent that day. Later, when the guests were gone, I found her alone in my husband's study, her fingers tracing the edge of his old leather journal. She looked up, and for a brief second, I saw a flicker of something raw. Grief, envy, maybe both. "He trusted you with everything," she whispered. "Even the parts of him that weren't yours to keep." I'd wanted to ask what she meant, but she left the room before I could. That was the beginning of our quiet war. Polite smiles in daylight, cold silence at night. Now, standing in the same kitchen where we'd once shared coffee and small talk, I felt the fracture widen inside me. I knelt beside the counter, pressing the hidden panel that opened the floor safe. The click echoed too loudly in the empty house. The safe door swung open. Empty. No documents, no jewelry, no will. Just dust and a faint impression where the folder used to be. I sank back onto the cold tile, my breath shallow. She'd taken everything. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Tick. Tock. The sound drilled into the silence, each second heavier than the last. I reached for the phone to call the police, but stopped. How could I explain this? A burned note, an empty safe, a missing daughter, and a warning from a frightened child. They'd think I was losing my mind. My gaze drifted to the darkened window. My reflection stared back. Older, hollow, afraid. But behind me, just for an instant, I thought I saw movement. I turned sharply. Nothing there. Only the faint echo of Clara's voice from years ago, whispering from memory. "You can't protect everything, Mother. Sooner or later, someone takes it from you." And I realized she already had. The night had bled into morning before I called the police. I sat on the kitchen floor, phone pressed to my ear, trying to sound sane as I explained my grandson was missing, my daughter unreachable, and my house. Well, my house no longer felt like mine. By the time 2 officers arrived, pale light was breaking through the curtains. They moved through the rooms carefully, murmuring into radios, leaving muddy footprints where Clara's once had been. I waited, numb, until one of them stepped back inside. "Mrs. Harlow?" His voice was soft, cautious. "We found the boy." I was on my feet before the words finished leaving his mouth. They took me 3 houses down, to Mrs. Langford's place. Her porch light was still on, casting a weak orange glow over the rain-soaked steps. When the door opened, I saw Noah sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes wide and unfocused. He looked smaller somehow, shrunken into himself. I knelt in front of him, trembling. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" He shook his head but didn't meet my eyes. "Can you tell me what happened?" I whispered. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice barely louder than a breath, Mom told me to pack my bag. Said we were going on a trip. But when she went outside, I heard her talking to a man. My throat tightened. What man, Noah? He looked up then, eyes glistening. He said he was from the insurance place. They talked about money. About how everything had to look like an accident. I froze. They said something about the gas line, Grandma. That you'd be home by 8. His lip trembled. I didn't know what to do. Behind me, one of the officers exchanged a quick glance with the other. That was when Detective Marlowe arrived. Mid-40s, steady gaze, the kind of calm that made you want to trust him. He crouched down beside me, voice low. We've already called in the fire department to check the property, ma'am. Just a precaution. A precaution. The word rang hollow. I could still smell the faint trace of burnt paper on my hands, see the half-finished note curling in ash. Noah clung to my sleeve, his voice barely audible now. I tried to stop her, Grandma. I told her you'd get hurt. I pulled him into my arms, the weight of his small body shaking against me. My mind replayed every argument, every cold silence between Clara and me, each one now a breadcrumb leading to this moment. The truth was no longer hiding. It was spreading, slow and poisonous, through everything I thought I understood about my family. And as Detective Marlowe's radio crackled with static, I knew whatever the fireman found next would change everything. The scent of smoke still clung to my hair when we returned home later that afternoon. The firefighters had cleared the property. No leaks, no explosives, just some tampering, they'd said, though no one explained what kind. Detective Marlowe left 2 officers stationed outside for reassurance. It didn't help. The house still felt like it was watching me. Noah sat at the kitchen table, sipping cocoa, his hands trembling around the cup. I brushed his hair from his forehead and whispered, "You're safe now." But even as I said it, the lie tasted bitter. Safe didn't exist anymore. Not while Clara was still missing. I needed answers. When I climbed the stairs to her room, I noticed the smell first. Her perfume, faint but stubborn, mixed with dust and rain. The curtains were half drawn, the bed unmade. On the dresser sat a framed photo of the 3 of us. Me, Clara, and Noah at the lake last summer. I picked it up, studying the smile she'd worn like armor. Something behind the mirror caught the light. I leaned closer. The edge of the glass was slightly lifted, just enough to slide a hand behind. My fingers brushed something cold, metallic. A phone. Not her usual one. This was older, no case, no SIM label. My stomach knotted. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. No lock screen. No password. Only a flood of messages. Hundreds, some unread. The most recent thread was with a contact named Reese. Reese, we're running out of time. You said she'd be home by now. Clara, she will be. The policy is filed. Once it happens, the claim is automatic. Reese, you're sure no one else knows? Clara, just Noah. But he's a child. He won't talk. My hand went cold. Another message appeared further up the thread. Reese, the gas line works if it looks accidental. You said she keeps matches near the stove? Clara, yes. She's old-fashioned. She'll light one eventually. The phone slipped from my grasp, hitting the carpet with a dull thud. For a moment, all I could hear was the blood roaring in my ears. I sank to my knees in front of the mirror, forcing myself to meet my own reflection. My face looked strange. Foreign, the face of a woman who'd raised her own undoing. How could you? I whispered. How could my daughter, my only child, plan this? The woman in the mirror said nothing, just watched me with tired, accusing eyes. A sob rose in my chest, jagged and hot, but I swallowed it. Grief wouldn't help. Not now. I picked up the phone again, scrolling to the oldest message. It was dated 6 months ago. Clara, I can't do this anymore. She won't let me live my own life. Maybe she shouldn't have one either. That was when something in me broke, not like glass, but like ice cracking beneath weight. Quietly, fatally. Downstairs, Noah called for me, his small voice trembling. I wiped my face, pocketed the phone, and turned toward the door. "I'm coming, sweetheart," I said softly. But as I stepped into the hallway, the floorboard creaked behind me, followed by a voice I hadn't heard in days. "Looking for something, mother?" My heart stopped. The voice was Clara's. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd imagined it, that the voice behind me was a phantom stitched together by fear. But when I spun around, the hallway was empty. No Clara. No movement. Only shadows, long and trembling, cast by the weak light at the end of the corridor. I waited, listening. Nothing. By the time midnight arrived, I had convinced myself it was exhaustion playing tricks on me. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, his small body curled beneath a blanket. The officers outside had long since driven off after being called to another emergency. The house was once again ours. Silent, watching. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps that cut through the quiet like a blade. I froze. No one should have been here this late. I tucked Noah's blanket tighter around him, brushed a kiss to his forehead, and whispered, "Stay here, baby. Don't make a sound." When he stirred, I guided him gently into the pantry and shut the door, leaving a sliver of air between the hinges. Another knock. Slower this time. Confident. I opened the front door a few inches. A man stood on the porch, rain dripping from his black coat, his expression polite, practiced. "Mrs. Harlow? I'm terribly sorry to come by so late." His voice was smooth, almost warm. "I'm Reese. I work with your daughter, Clara. Is she home?" For a moment, my mind went blank. The name. The voice. The same one from the messages. I forced a smile. "Clara's not here. What's this about?" He sighed, stepping closer under the porch light. "I'm worried about her. She hasn't returned my calls. We were discussing an insurance matter, some paperwork she never finished. I thought maybe she'd stopped by." I studied him carefully. Hands too still. Eyes too focused. He was lying, every syllable polished to hide the truth. "I'm afraid I can't help you," I said, gripping the edge of the door. "Perhaps you should try the office tomorrow." Reese tilted his head, smiling faintly. "You've been through a lot tonight, haven't you?" Something cold unfurled inside me. "What do you mean?" His gaze flicked past me, toward the living room, where a faint outline of Noah's toy car rested on the floor. His voice softened, almost kindly. "It's a terrible thing, family turning on you. But sometimes, accidents make life easier." The words landed like poison. I shut the door halfway, heartbeat pounding. "Leave, Mr. Reese." He smiled again. Small, knowing. "Of course, ma'am. But we'll talk soon." As he walked away, I caught my reflection in the glass door, white-faced, trembling, holding the phone still hidden in my hand. His number glowed on the screen. And before dawn, I knew I'd have to use it. Sleep never came. I sat in the living room, the lamp dimmed to a soft, anxious glow, listening to the echo of Reese's parting words. Accidents make life easier. They clung to the walls like smoke. By morning, I'd convinced myself I needed proof. Something tangible, something undeniable. Detective Marlowe's promise to look into it wasn't enough. Men like Reese didn't just vanish. They cleaned up after themselves. And Clara, she was his shadow now, somewhere between guilt and greed. I moved through the house quietly, each step deliberate. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp chill that clung to everything. Noah still slept in the pantry, wrapped in safety's illusion. I kissed his forehead, whispering, "Stay here a little longer." When I reached Clara's room again, sunlight slipped through the curtains like a blade, cutting across the dresser where I'd found the second phone. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror. Tired eyes, gray roots, a woman searching her own child's life for evidence of betrayal. The drawers were empty, except one that stuck halfway. I tugged, and it came free with a screech, revealing a stack of receipts. Pawn shops, loan agencies, storage rentals. Beneath them, a folded scrap of newspaper circled in red. Project Haven expands private facility. I frowned. It sounded like a company, but why would Clara care about that? As I shifted the rug beneath the dresser, my heel struck something hollow. I knelt, peeling the edge of the carpet back. The floorboard beneath was newer than the rest, its grain too pale. A loose nail caught my finger. I pried it up and lifted the plank. Inside the cavity was a small black book, bound in leather and tied with a faded ribbon. A ledger. My breath hitched. I sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through the pages. Neat handwriting, Clara's again, filled every line. Dates, amounts, withdrawals, thousands over months. Each note paired with a word: transfer, haven, asset, life claim, Reese, confirmed. The last entry was dated a week ago. Finalize Project Haven. Ensure Elara stability file is complete. Reese will handle documentation. Below that, in the corner, a scribbled note. Noah must stay elsewhere. She can't take him too. My vision blurred. She had planned everything. The false policy. The tampered gas line. The quiet framing of her mother as a fragile, unstable woman. A woman who'd accidentally taken her own life. And when the investigation closed, Clara would be the grieving daughter collecting on the policy. I pressed the ledger to my chest, the paper rough against my palms. A sound escaped my throat. Half sob, half laugh. I had raised her. I had held her hand through every fever, every heartbreak. And now she'd rewritten me as her downfall, her prophet. The light shifted across the room, landing on the mirror again. I looked up, meeting my own gaze. This ends with me, I said quietly. Not her. Not him. A sudden creak downstairs snapped my head toward the door. Footsteps. Slow. Confident. I stuffed the ledger into my coat pocket and rose to my feet. Mrs. Harlow? A man's voice floated up from below, Reese's voice. We need to finish our conversation. This time, I didn't tremble. Reese's footsteps echoed through the house as if he owned it. Slow, deliberate, certain. I stayed perfectly still at the top of the stairs, the ledger heavy in my coat pocket, its edges cutting into my palm. Mrs. Harlow? His voice was smooth again, casual, the same tone he'd used the night before. You shouldn't dig into things you don't understand. I forced my breath steady. You're right, I called down. Why don't we talk? Somewhere neutral. A pause. Then lightly, I was hoping you'd say that. By evening, the rain had returned. Not a drizzle this time, but a relentless curtain that turned the roads into rivers. I drove toward the outskirts of town, every mile pulling me closer to the old farmhouse where my husband had been born. The place had been abandoned for years, its windows boarded, its fields wild with weeds. A fitting stage for lies to die. Detective Marlowe's voice echoed in my memory. We'll have a team nearby, but you'll have to keep him talking. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. When I arrived, the farmhouse loomed in the downpour, a skeletal silhouette against the flash of lightning. I parked just beyond the tree line, headlights off. The rain drummed against the roof, drowning out the sound of my heartbeat. Reese's black car appeared minutes later, cutting through the storm. He stepped out, unbothered by the rain, his umbrella perfectly still above him. He smiled when he saw me. Mrs. Harlow, he said, voice smooth as oil. You chose quite the meeting spot. It seemed private, I replied, handing him the phone I'd found, its cracked screen faintly glowing. You can have this. Just tell me where my daughter is. He chuckled, low and cruel. Still pretending she's the victim? What did you do to her? What we did, you mean, he corrected. Clara came to me with the plan. All I did was make it real. The policy, the paperwork, even the doctor's letter about your mental decline. You'd be surprised how easy it is to erase someone respectable. I swallowed hard, forcing tears that weren't entirely fake. She promised she wouldn't hurt Noah. Of course not, he said with a smirk. The boy was leverage, nothing more. Once the house went up, Clara would take him somewhere new. Project Haven, remember? Her idea of freedom. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. Calm, confident, certain of his control. That was the moment I gave the signal. A subtle tap on my wristwatch, just as Marlowe had instructed. Reese took a step closer. You know, I almost feel sorry for you. Don't, I whispered. Headlights exploded through the rain. Police cruisers cutting across the field. The flash of red and blue reflected in Reese's widening eyes before he bolted for his car. But it was too late. Officers emerged from the dark, weapons drawn, voices sharp against the storm. I stood there, rain soaking through my coat, watching as they pinned him to the mud. His voice still reached me through the chaos. She'll never forgive you for this. She loved you once. The words stayed with me long after the sirens faded, because deep down, I knew he was right. The rain hadn't stopped when they called me. Detective Marlowe's voice was steady, but I caught the weight beneath it. We found her, Mrs. Harlow. Motel off Route 6. She checked in under a false name yesterday morning. For a long time, I couldn't speak. I just stared out the window at the storm, at the old oak bending beneath the wind, and wondered if forgiveness was even possible for people like us. When I arrived, the motel looked like a place built to hide regret. Peeling paint, dim lights, the faint hum of neon struggling to stay alive. Room 12. Marlowe stood outside the door, coat dripping. She asked for you, he said quietly. I stepped inside. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, wrists cuffed, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was tangled, her eyes bloodshot. For the first time, she looked small, not the woman who'd built lies from money and fear, but the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. She looked up. You came. I almost didn't, I said. A bitter smile touched her lips. Because of what I did. Because I don't know who you are anymore. Her gaze flickered away. You always knew, she said. You just didn't want to see it. I sat down across from her, the chair creaking between us. Tell me why, Clara. I deserve that much. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Then her voice came, quiet but sharp, like glass underfoot. You ruined everything, Mother. Dad was sick, and you wouldn't let him try the new treatment. Said it was too risky, too expensive. You said, we'll get through it naturally. He trusted you, and then he died. My chest tightened. I did what the doctors recommended. You decided, she interrupted. You always decide. Every house, every loan, every step I took. You pulled the strings. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice hardened. When my marriage fell apart, you told me I was dramatic. When I went broke, you told me to work harder. You never helped. You just stood there, judging. I swallowed, my voice breaking. So you planned to kill me? That's how you take back control. I didn't want to kill you, she snapped, then stopped, breath shaking. I wanted to disappear. Reese said it would be easy, fake your death, collect the insurance, start over somewhere else. But he wanted more. He said you had to be the example. Her words hung between us, heavy, ugly, true. I looked at her, the trembling hands, the hollow eyes, the desperate need to be seen. All those years I'd thought my silence was love, my guidance protection. Maybe to her, it had always felt like a cage. Clara, I whispered, you could have come to me. She laughed softly, bitterly. I did. You just didn't listen. I reached across the small space between us, hesitating before touching her hand. She didn't pull away. You'll have to face what you've done, I said. But you won't do it alone. For the first time, her eyes met mine without anger. Just exhaustion. Marlowe cleared his throat gently at the door. It's time. They led her out, the rain still falling outside like a quiet verdict. I followed, standing beneath the motel awning, watching as the cruiser's lights disappeared into the storm. For years, I had blamed her for what she became. But in that moment, I realized some part of her, the fearful, furious child, was mine to answer for too. When the silence finally returned, it wasn't peace I felt. It was the hollow ache of truth settling where love used to live. The house was quiet again, quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. No officers outside, no investigators walking through the rooms with clipboards and polite questions. Just me, the soft ticking of the hallway clock, and the faint smell of rain through an open window. It had been 6 weeks since Clara's arrest. 6 weeks since that motel room, since the sound of her voice cracked something inside me I hadn't realized was still breakable. The newspapers had called it the Harlow scheme, as if it were a story, not a family unraveling. The town whispered about betrayal, money, madness. No one talked about love. I sat in Noah's room now, the one place that still felt untouched. He was asleep, sprawled across his small bed, his hand resting on the same dinosaur print pillowcase he'd insisted on keeping. The lamp beside him glowed dimly, catching the edges of the drawings taped to the wall. Bright suns, stick figures, and one picture that stopped me every time I saw it: 3 people holding hands. No faces. Just outlines. I picked up the book from the bedside table. The Velveteen Rabbit. It had been Clara's favorite when she was Noah's age. I opened it, running a finger along the worn spine, and began to read softly, more to myself than to him. Once you are real, you can't become unreal again. It lasts for always. The words caught in my throat. Maybe that was the cruel truth of motherhood. You become real through love, and you stay that way through pain. Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck midnight. I closed the book gently and pulled the blanket higher around Noah's shoulders. He stirred but didn't wake. The trial was set for next week. Marlowe had warned me it would be public, cruel, necessary. Reese had already taken a plea deal. Clara refused one. She wanted to face the court, he said. To tell her side. I didn't know if that meant remorse or defiance. Maybe both. Some nights, I caught myself wondering if I'd testify for her or against her. Then I'd remember Noah's trembling voice on the phone, and the decision would make itself. Still, a part of me grieved for her, not as the criminal she'd become, but as the daughter who once believed I could fix everything with a story and a lullaby. I rose quietly, smoothing the quilt before stepping into the hallway. The house creaked softly under my feet, familiar and forgiving. For the first time in months, the silence didn't frighten me. At the end of the hall, the porch light flickered, the same old bulb that had buzzed on the night this began. I walked toward it, half expecting to feel that same cold dread rise inside me. But tonight, it felt different. Calmer. Like the house was finally breathing again. Through the window, I saw the yard glistening with dew. The storm had washed everything clean: the porch, the cracked walkway, even the scorched patch near the gas line. Nature's quiet forgiveness. I sank into the armchair by the window, the same one where I used to wait for Clara to come home from college, and closed my eyes. Her laughter came back to me, bright, reckless, alive. For a moment, I let it stay. Then I whispered, "I forgive you." The words felt strange on my tongue, but lighter than I expected. Forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about surviving the ruin she left behind. A car passed on the street, its headlights sweeping across the wall, catching the photo of the 3 of us at the lake. For the first time, I didn't look away. Outside, the porch light flickered once more and steadied. Soft, golden, steady. I exhaled, the tension finally loosening from my chest. Maybe this was what peace looked like. Not joy, not erasure. Just the quiet understanding that some love survives even after it breaks you. I turned off the lamp and glanced back at Noah, still safe in sleep, still whole. The past was a scar now, not an open wound. And as dawn began to lighten the edges of the sky, I knew that whatever the trial brought, whatever the world decided about Clara, one truth would remain. We had survived her darkness. And in that survival, somehow, we had become real again.